welcome you, Everything ALS and Holt-Paolone have collaborated on this topic. We just thought it was something important. I know we often focus a lot on the people who actually are diagnosed with ALS, but we know that caregivers also need a great deal of attention and are struggling just as much. So Jamie and I decided that we would collaborate, and we also know in the ALS community it's really, really important to collaborate. So we're going to do this together, and I'd like to introduce Jamie Pickett.
Well, thanks, Deb. It's really an honor to be working, again, collaborating with Everything ALS. One of the things that the ALS Hope Foundation wants to do is try to educate ourselves and try to educate others as much as possible. So any collaboration that we can do with other people just makes everything much better. So we really appreciate everything that Everything ALS does. I joke that the meetings that we have, or that Everything ALS has, is every other Wednesday for about 2 hours. And it's usually about 4 hours a month. And they're probably my favorite 4 hours of the month, because you get to interact with patients and caregivers and families. And I learn so much during those programs. So we love working with Everything ALS. Real quick, before we move forward, I thought this was important because the caregivers need as much help as the patients, I feel. When I was growing up, in my teenage years, my father had multiple sclerosis and he became bedridden. And my mom and I took care of my dad. And it was, it was trying for a teenager. But I learned through the eyes of my mom and I what it takes to be strong and to be on all the time to take care of him. With that being said, flash forward a lot of years later, my best friend was diagnosed with ALS, and I just wanted to take care of him and be with him. And I think that experience that I had watching my dad helped me go forward. So anytime a patient comes in, I always want to make sure that the caregiver has the support and the care and the needs and the information, so they know that they're not alone. One of the things I try to say is that we're here for you, we're with you, and they might not hear it because being a caregiver is a frightening thing, and it's also you need strength for that. One of the things about today is, before we introduce Mary and Marie, is that I'm grateful to see over 53 people are here. And it's important to know that you look around at all these faces, all these names. It's awesome that we're here together and you're not alone. And, one of the saddest things that could happen is that you feel that you're alone and doing this by yourself. But right here, we got 53 people that are joining us, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for Mary Holt-Paolone, who is our mental health specialist at the ALS Center of Hope in Temple University. And we also have Marie Mullins. She is actually a current caregiver. We take care of her husband at the ALS Center of Hope, and she has been inspirational not only to us, but to other families. So I just want to turn it over to you guys, and we'll have questions and answers at the end of your presentation that we can answer for you guys. And take it away, our good friends, Mary and Marie.
Okay. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jamie. I absolutely want to ditto what was said about Jamie, because it is a sincere honor to work with you, and appreciate all that you put out into the ALS community and just the world in general. And also too, just to say, highly, honored to be here and just applauding Everything ALS as I've kind of perused all of the, your websites and things and all of the work that you've been doing. It's really just incredibly touching. So I'm really grateful for all of your work, and also how wonderful it is on a Sunday here that we're all, unfortunately in many places still kind of physically distanced, but that we can socially connect on this great platform here of Zoom. So really grateful for that. So before I really dive into anything, I just wanted to see if Marie would like to say anything or a hello to the group here before I move into my jazz.
just hello. Thank you for coming and welcome to this abnormal world. Mary.
Not right. Yeah. Okay. Super great. So part of me, of course, so I've worked with, I've worked in the field of ALS for about 16 years with families. Started out, I'm a nurse by trade, and now I'm the mental health nurse. So I work with a lot of families in terms of, just emotional support, education, life choices, all those sorts of things. And on a personal note, I certainly, I do know firsthand kind of that role of a caregiver. It's incredibly passionate about it. It's incredibly close to my heart. I took care of my mom for quite some time while she was ill, and then also my husband while he was sick for a number of years. And we had a number of life decisions to make along that journey. And tough decisions. There were a lot of tough moments. There were a lot of beautiful moments. And he ended up passing. And I'm so blessed for the people that I have around me that I can say that I can look back on that whole experience and, see the beauty of it, and really just really appreciate the whole experience. So in saying that, my husband did not have ALS, so I do not know what it is like firsthand. And I try not to pretend to know what it's like firsthand to live with somebody that has ALS or take care of someone. So part of me is like, sorry that we even have to have this call. ALS even exists. And I also know that these people that are in my life, these families that I get to work with and meet, like Marie, and I'm sure all of you, it's just have incredibly touched my life and inspired me in ways that I could never even describe or imagine. So I thank you all for that. All right, so I realize I want to be mindful of time. So, as we're all here, I do have some slides to share. I have about 15 slides. Just to kind of give us a sense of like a framework around, caregiving and mental health, and to hopefully validate some of the things that some of you may be experiencing. Also just know, I think the disclaimer is that it's not all inclusive. We have a limited amount of time here. I could probably talk for, we could do a number of weeks seminar on caregiving. So, I would just, kind of invite everyone just to kind of take a breath. Like, here we are, like, we've made it. Hopefully technology is working in where you are, but just to kind of breathe out for a minute, just to, acknowledge that here we are here together as I share my screen. Okay, so can people see that?
Yes.
Yes. All right, super, great. Okay. So let us begin here. Okay. All right. So the one thing I do want to, I actually can't minimize now. All right. So this, this image here, of course, yes, it's an educational seminar, and I realize that we're here on Zoom, but I do hope that you can, in some way kind of, feel my presence and my heart is here with you in this talk and in the time that we're here together. And, this picture really is, I think my whole message is that we need each other. We absolutely need each other. And, I love that this image kind of had the little child's hand in the midst, because sometimes the children, none of us live in a bubble. So it's, the children get affected. A lot of children are caregivers, just like Jamie was describing. So, just to really acknowledge everyone that gets involved. All right, we're going to see here how this is going to let me, it's not letting me forward. Technology is good when it works. All right, there we go. Here we go. Okay, so our objectives, certainly to provide education and statistical information, just to kind of give a framework, like I said, about caregiving in general. Identify resources for support and ideas for resiliency. That's actually a big word that I use And in terms of caregiving research and support efforts around the world, resiliency is a big topic, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, the probably even more important than anything that I share with you guys is Marie, her graciousness that she'll be sharing her personal experience and some real life kind of tips that she has garnered. All right, so I do try to use humor. So this did come out, it's a little bit blurry, but listen to this. In order to be eligible for public home care services, people must first have exhausted the caregiving and support capabilities of friends, relatives, and other community members. So we see the caregiver here saying, exhausted. Yes, that's absolutely right, right? And, just to acknowledge that caregiving can absolutely be exhausting on many levels, physically, emotionally, mentally. There's a lot of balls, that caregivers hold. So let's really just take a moment to kind of give a clear picture, like what's this picture of a caregiver? In 2017, there was a study that was done. It was a survey of over 3,100 caregivers. And, what they found is they asked a number of demographic questions and kind of quality of life, how they coped, things like that. And it's really a diverse population, just like that kind of first image, the picture originally had shown. It can be anyone. So it can be, the spouse, the loved one, the partner, certainly a neighbor, a friend, a family member, a child, paid caregivers. But this survey in particular was over 3,100 of non-professional. So they were all kind of family members and friends and things. So what we see here is, of course, more women than men. The statistics are still current, absolutely. And, in terms of the ages, this is interesting. So the highest percentage is 57 to 75 years old. So you think about somebody that's 57 to 75 years old and what's happening in their life at those times. There's a lot of duties. You could have children as well as caregiving. And then we see that 77% of these people were, 75 and older. So that's significant. And then work, which is, when we talk about some of the complicating or added factors, 39% are working full time, 13% part time, and this 40% not employed. So, that makes me wonder, is it that they're not employed and they have kind of all this time then to be caregiver? I'm sure that wasn't the vision in and of itself as well. Or is it that they're not employed because they have had to pull back because of caregiving duties? And then also the ripple effect of that, what then is the financial kind of fallout from all of that, right? So there's this is a really kind of rich and full topic. So here's my plug that I hope that you will absolutely 100% come away with, that you are so incredibly important as the caregiver. I'm not sure the mix of people that we have on here. I'm assuming that most of the people on the call are caregivers, that you really are an incredibly vital part, which can sometimes be like that silent sufferer, where sometimes the medical needs or the day-to-day in and day out needs of your loved one or the person that is, or just taking care of the house or whatever it may be, coordinating appointments, calling insurance companies, that then your needs can oftentimes get, kind of fall to the back burner. And, when we think about this kind of ALS care puzzle, the caregiver is really a hugely, if not the most important piece of that in terms of decision making. Sometimes your transportation, coordinating appointments, full on direct care, all sorts of things. So there is a man, Richard Schultz, that does a lot of research in caregiving and really states that, caregivers are a critical national healthcare resource. You think about, we take for granted all the things that family caregivers do and friends, and how much that would cost our healthcare system in our world, hundreds of billions of dollars on a yearly basis if that had to be purchased. So please know how vital everything that you do is. So beginning to just take a look at some of the impacts of caregiving. This really is considered a major health issue. It really is. So evidence, I mean, policymakers, and I think as a national, country, that we are really, over the last number of years, it's really become a primary focus in a lot of areas, which is a great thing, because the health effects are significant, can be significant. So we see here 55% of caregivers, report physical and emotional exhaustion, and even this kind of sense of complete overwhelm. Caregivers are definitely at higher risk for lower quality of life, weakened immune systems, increased psychological distress, increased stress in general. And then, of course, this man Schultz, he says, no caregivers are challenged more than those of ALS patients. Wow. So that's not to overwhelm anyone, in a sense, that's on this call, but it's really to say that what you're experiencing and what you're living is really valid. It's big. So just to talk a little bit about the complicating factors to caregiving. And like I said, this is not exhaustive. We could add lots of different things to this list for sure. But I have to say that over the years, I mean, probably one of the biggest factors that can complicate or add to this, the challenges of caregiving, can be the relationship with the person receiving care. Now, that can also be a wonderful benefit, depending on the dynamics of that relationship for sure. So, of course, the specifics in terms of how the caregiver is going to potentially respond, that depends on whether it is the spouse, the friend, the parent, the child, which can have lots of different and varying experiences individual to that particular role. The levels of grief and the way that people experience the grief, whether it's depending on whether it's your spouse or if it's a parent or your child, or maybe just a friend. Not just a friend, that's important as well. And then, like I said, the dynamics of the relationship, differing approaches. So that is something that can certainly be a challenge. If, oftentimes I'll see couples where, one member of the partnership wants to be very proactive, wants to know everything, and the other person, and it may be the caregiver, it may be the person living with the disease, doesn't want to know anything and wants to remain kind of closed and just deal with things as they arise. And that can create definitely some challenges within that caregiving role. And then I put here role changes too, just in terms of, if it is a spouse or a child, certainly, that these roles change, families, or say, just for example, maybe a spouse that, gets ALS, that handled all the finances, kind of scheduled all the appointments, did the house, took care of the house and things like that. And now these roles, fall onto potentially the spouse that's the caregiver. So work, financial challenges, we mentioned that briefly. Individual disease progression, that I see as significant as well, just in terms of how that develops and the reactions or how the burden on the caregiver. And certainly in the early stages of disease, it's well documented that there's less what we call caregiver burden. And I use that word not in a sense to say that anyone that's ill is a burden, but that is kind of the framework word that we use. And then, of course, if somebody has a rapid disease progression, it can be oftentimes very difficult, can add a little, or other levels of stress in terms of being able to catch up to all the changes and make sure that you have everything. And then, there are the outlier people, kind of that fall outside the statistics, that have the disease for quite a while, for a number of years. And that can also bring along with it this sense of kind of what we call disease fatigue, caregiving fatigue. Certainly 100%, absolutely. Cognitive changes, FTD is frontotemporal lobe dementia. So if there are cognitive changes, that adds a whole nother level in terms of caregiving, and really has to be addressed on really in an educational perspective, and trying as best we can to kind of give the caregivers an understanding that about, what's happening in the person's brain as a result of the disease, and also try to give them some ways to manage that constructively. If there's limited resources for support and help, limited financial resources, limited access, all sorts of things can definitely add to it. Our big friend or enemy, I don't know, over the last year, COVID-19, increased isolation, right? I have not talked to one caregiver or person with ALS that has, not said that they've been greatly affected by the increased isolation of quarantine and lack of access to resources because of COVID. So that has been a significant added challenge for families. And then all the additional stressors that I don't have listed, which can go on and on. If people have dependent children, so you have children that have their own, coping and reactions to all that's happening. You're trying to take care of that. You're trying to take care of your loved one potentially. Family challenges, sometimes there's disputes among family members or disagreements or people not showing up when we would like them to, all sorts of things. So it is a big pie. It's a big pie. So let's look at some of the potential negative effects of caregiving. Physically, there can be fatigue, weakened immune system, sleep disruption, headaches, increased muscle tension, decreased socialization, increased stress, and more things. So most of the information, if not all the information that I'm giving today, is really from a lot of the research studies that have done caregiving in general and also ALS specific care. So these are things that we have definitely that are documented and have been, seen and researched in ALS caregivers. So certainly to acknowledge that this potentially could happen, although they don't have to happen, right? Then there can be emotional, mental, and spiritual effects. Irritability, frustration, grief, guilt, anger, resentment, anxiety, fear, confusion, loneliness, overwhelm, increased risk for depression, decreased concentration and memory, and maladaptive coping. Wow. And like I said, probably more so that may not be listed here. So yes, absolutely, to validate that these things, if you experience these things, it is sometimes a natural part of the process. And it doesn't have to be also. So what I also want to talk about is we'll also give the flip side, right? So how is it that we can avoid some of these things? So caregiver burnout. It's really what I would hope to help all of my families avoid is the other thing I want to say too, just about when we talked about roles, is this piece of, where roles change in terms of I become just the caregiver, and many caregivers will say this to me. I feel like I'm just the caregiver or the nurse, and I'm not the spouse anymore. So it's really important for us to try to help people find ways to, kind of maintain pieces of that relationship. So common signs, I always want people to know, to be aware of this. Caregiver burnout, it's a real thing. Easily frustrated or flustered, forgetful or foggy, quick to anger, anxious or depressed, hopeless or helpless, feeling uninterested in things that used to bring you joy, and this kind of extreme fatigue. Now, I do want to note that these experiences can come, day to day, they can come and go. Many humans, many caregivers experience these emotions. When we look kind of at this, or if we're assessing for kind of burnout, these experiences and these emotions are kind of the overhanging umbrella. They're there more prevalently, much more of the time. So there are things that I try to assess when, I'm talking with our caregivers. Is this, 25% of the time? Does it kind of come and go? All those things. So when we're looking at burnout, hopefully we can help people avoid getting to burnout. Okay, so I've laid out this horrible idea, right? All these horrible things that are going to happen as a caregiver if we're caregiving. Is it all bad? Absolutely not. No, it does not have to be. Is it difficult at times? Yes, 100%. Is it going to challenge us? You betcha, right? Is it going to pull at our guts at times? 100%. Yes. Do we potentially want to walk away? Maybe, right? However, it doesn't have to all be bad, right? So research does show, I love these studies that even in the midst of like when times are tense and demands are growing and the disease of ALS is progressing, and so there's more demands possibly on the caregiver, that that people are still able to identify, right, these positive aspects, finding preciousness in ordinary moments, like wow, right? Feeling needed, right? People say, yes, I really do feel like I have a sense of purpose. It's really hard, and yes, I'm tired, and I'm learning a lot new skills, right? And I do feel good about myself some of the time, right? And some of my relationships are strengthening. We would hope that would happen, that the relationships would strengthen and that ALS does not beat down your relationships. If that is happening, please, please, please reach out, right? So these pictures here of, and this is, Marie was kind enough to let me use these photos here, and of she and her husband, David, 2020 and 2021. So David certainly has progressed in his disease. And one of the things that I think is wonderful about them is that they still, and Marie in particular, well, both of them, that they still find, they continue, and she is determined. She tells me that she is determined to continue to find, the preciousness in the ordinary and to make life, the quality of life better, right? So, thank you, Marie, for letting us use those. But just to say that this was actually at a 2020, that was the picture from them at an ALS gala. And they were actually out dancing that night, I remember. And then 2021, this was just recently David's birthday, and they took a trip away, a local, they just went away for a couple of days, just to really, change things up. And it's delightful. All right, so caregiving can absolutely oftentimes look like this. And I do love this little, pie kind of scale diagram or clock, even though, it doesn't tell us every 12 hours, challenging day, easy day, feeling optimistic. It can be a hot, kind of a mix of all of this, even moment to moment. So for a lot of people, and we could probably add a lot of different things in there. And my hope is that if the, arrow kind of was swinging more often to approaching burnout, my hope is that you would be reaching out in some way, right? So yes, just to validate that it's all there. All right, so this is where we get to, we'll talk a little bit about, just to give a sense of what this resiliency, right? So I have to say, I have not met one person yet in this ALS community that does not have resilience within them. Just continually amaze me and are remarkable. So just to give a sense that resilience is this ability to kind of withstand, to actually recover and bounce back, and maybe even grow. Some people even grow when faced with adversity. It is an active process, one that I know myself when I was caregiving, and even still today, I have got to seek out ways to become more resilient. It helps sustain caregiver health. We have seen that studies show that resiliency tools help sustain caregiver health well-being, and it improves our capacity to give care. And it reduces vulnerability to stress. That's huge. So what do the studies show about resiliency in caregivers? What are these people doing? We wanted to find out. This is what they're doing. This is what the studies show that they're doing. They tend to their own health. PEMS, that's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So oftentimes, people that within these studies that when they were asked these questions, they were oftentimes, at some point addressing all of these kind of, this whole big piece of their health, not just one piece. They forgive themselves and others for mistakes. Not that people do this perfectly or all the time, 24/7. They ask for and receive help. They ask for and receive help. They look for solutions to problems. They actively use gratitude and humor. They acknowledge their own limitations. They look for positives and challenges. They allow full range of their emotions, like, yes, I am angry today, or I just don't have it right now. And then they seek out supportive social connections. And that's really a huge piece as well, that studies do definitely show that caregivers that are connected, just humans in general, but really caregivers that are connected in terms of supportive social connections fare better and live longer. Right? So that's what people are doing. So we can kind of take inventory in our own lives. Not to say that anybody, if you don't do these things, because let me tell you, I am not one to ask for help. That's not my personality. Yet when I was as an active caregiver, the situation drove me to absolutely say, I think I reached the burnout point, and it was kind of like a plea. So you don't have to get to that point. So Caregiver Resources. Now I have one slide on this, and let me tell you, I could go on and on, but I just want to be mindful of our time. So this is kind of there's lots of specifics, and holy moly, please, if you have any specific questions, please know that you can reach out to alshopefoundation.org. There's EverythingALS.org. I put their websites here. I'm sure you have them. But if anybody has any specific questions for me, or you want to, whatever, you can certainly contact the ALS Hope Foundation, and I can give you more specifics. So what can be, I was just trying to think of what can be kind of your safety net. If you are connected to a multidisciplinary team, please use them. The neurologist or the physician that you see, it might be your primary care physician or your loved one's primary care physician that is kind of manning everything, and that's totally fine. Whoever it is, use them, ask questions. What is it that I need to know? Marie, huge. She always says to me, Mary, what do I need to know? Tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to know. Super great, because I can't think of everything, right? So mental health specialists, social workers, therapists, please don't be afraid to reach out for help and ask. We're here. We, certainly cannot, if your clinic team doesn't have mental health, my guess is that, or even primary care physician, whoever these healthcare providers are for you, just ask them. And my sense is that they could probably give you some resources. If not, I can certainly help potentially. There are a ton of online resources too, but some we have to stay away from. Supportive families. And I always use that word supportive, just because family, friends, and spiritual mentors. I love my family. And sometimes I had to seek out those that were maybe more supportive. Stress management and relaxation, that's a whole big ball in and of itself. Having, finding a little bit of fun, being able to step away, meditation, breathing, fellow caregivers, connecting. Like Jamie was saying, we are not alone. You are not alone in this. Even though it can feel that way tremendously. Support groups. We actually had, during COVID, we started a weekly virtual on Zoom support group for caregivers every Tuesday at 2:00. Everybody was home, so we just started it, and it's still ongoing. Marie is part of that group, and it's really quite an experience. I'm blessed and honored to be part of that. And care teams, and what I mean about that, care teams, is that yes, you have your care teams at your office, your doctor's offices and things, but when I say care teams, I mean, who is it? Okay, so my husband has ALS and can't mow the lawn anymore. So who could mow the lawn? I have to potentially work part-time, and I have to take care of so-and-so, and I can't get dinner done every night. So putting care teams together in terms of, we do that for families a lot of the time, who can help out, right? So I originally had a picture here that said you can do it. And I actually changed it because me, myself, and I can't do it all. Even though I would like to think that I could, I can't. So together we can. Together. a lot of people will say to me, when should I seek out help? That's really an individual decision, of course. But I do I usually give people a kind of my standard approach is as soon as possible. As soon as possible. Diagnosis comes, all right, what, where's my care team? After, of course, we manage, you know, when we're able to kind of move out of the shock and even putting our brain around what's happening, of course, or your brain around what's happening. So as soon as possible, put the insurance in the bank, get those things going, not real insurance, but, you know, for yourself in terms of your mental health and well-being. So as we were mentioning that Tuesday group, which I am incredibly honored to be a part of, there are caregivers that have wanted to share some, you know, tips that they've taken along the way, and also things that are important to them, and some former caregivers. So just to mention these few things: breathe, pause, and breathe again, and don't forget to exhale a lot, and don't sweat the small stuff. Know your limitations and forgive yourself if you mess up. No question is a stupid question. Ask for help. It's not only okay, but necessary to find time to be good to yourself. It may seem like there's never enough time to take care of you. You're right. We just have to make time. Early acceptance, open communication, and early preparation are helpful. And live life. Do things you both enjoy. Most of all, don't forget yourself and your own mental health. Accept what you cannot change. Choose to find as much love and connection as possible in each moment. Simplify things if you can to prevent rushing and multitasking. Realize that anger, resentment, frustration, and those negative emotions take a lot of energy away from us. We can choose how we approach every moment. Find meaning. This isn't all for nothing. And remember, you will get through this. So that's from some of the caregivers and former caregivers of that Tuesday support group. And then finally, if any of you are caregivers or for all the caregivers that are on this call, if you do just, so I had kind of modified or adapted these ALS caregiver rights. So if you just want to, if you want to, you don't have to certainly, but if you want to just kind of close your eyes, not read, but just hear this, just listen to this. Let me say to you that as an ALS care partner, you absolutely have the right to take care of yourself. This is not an act of selfishness. It can give you the capacity to take better care of your loved one. You absolutely have the right to ask for help from others, even if your loved one objects. It is okay to recognize the limits of your own endurance and strength. You have the right to seek out mental health support if you need or want it. This is not a weakness, but an act of self-care and self-preservation. You have the right to do some things for yourself and maintain facets of your own life that do not include caregiving. You have the right to get angry, to be tired, to feel sad, confused, overwhelmed, depressed, and all those other emotions, and to express those things in healthy ways. You have the right to counter any attempts by your loved ones or others, conscious or not conscious, to manipulate you through, anger, depression, resentment. You have the right to receive appreciation, consideration, affection, and acceptance for what you do to and for your loved one, remembering that you too can offer these qualities back to your loved one in return. You have the right to forgive yourself when you may fall short in productivity, behavior, speech, and/or intent. You absolutely have the right to laugh, to feel love and joy and happiness despite the sadness surrounding you at times. And you 100% absolutely have the right to take pride in what you are accomplishing and to applaud yourself for the courage and strength it takes to show up, to be present, to advocate for, and to give care to your loved one in whatever way that you're able to do that moment to moment. So please know that we so thank you for all that you do. Realize it's not an easy job. So that's all I have for you, my friends. Take a breath in, a breath out as we pause, and we're gonna, shift here a little bit maybe. So Marie Mullins Bishop, she can tell you a little bit about that, but so she's going to share, her personal experience with us. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank
That
you.
was Mary, that was really valuable. Thank you so very much. And as you were doing your presentation, I had so many thoughts about my experience as well. And I was thinking about Marie. Oftentimes, the person who is battling ALS is the person that we would go to talk out our frustration with other people. And then that other layer is that person maybe can no longer fill that role because what we want to talk about is that person. So there's that layer. And I think that we all hear so much about gratitude, and I know it's really important, but I got to tell you, on some days, I just felt like gratitude for what? You know, it's just, and it gets, and there's no, you know, there's no shame in feeling that way at that moment. And perhaps some days being disappointed in others because they don't show up the way we want them to show up. So there's so many feelings, but it's okay to feel whatever you feel. I just also wanted to note that not everybody has a team. You know, not everybody has a group of people to help them, and that's really difficult too, and we recognize that. And the last thing, there's a thing, I don't know if you are all aware of it, called the caring bridge. So, you know, instead of people calling you, how is Harry doing? You know, what's going on? You can put on the caring bridge an update, but you can also ask people what you need. You can just say, I need a meal train. I need help with rides. I need a break. Can somebody come over? So it's a really great tool. It's free, and it's called Caring Bridge. And you just invite people who you want to come to your site. Marie, thank you so much for being here. And I'm really excited, as we all are, to hear what you have to say.
Thank you. I proudly married my husband, David, on August 28th, 2020, knowing he was diagnosed with ALS. I wanted him to know that my role as a girlfriend gave me the freedom of choice to stay or to go. But as his wife, I promised to be understanding and love him no matter what might transpire in the future. I originally titled ALS the stolen identity disease because that's what it does. ALS stole the joy, freedom, and normal body functions of my husband and still causes me to challenge my inner strength, possibilities, and love for him as a wife. I've learned as a wife, companion, and best friend to David that the initials ALS really symbolize always love someone. When his speech is not clear and we can't have a normal conversation, we just text each other. Kids do it all the time. If I notice he's in discomfort, I just hold his hand to say, I'm here. I remind him every day of how much I love him in hopes that he would want to look forward to another day. When I look at him, I see the things that he can do and not focus on what he used to do. I didn't go to medical school, so I never tried to be part of my husband's medical team. Trust me, in doing that, we become more of a pain and you can finish the rest. The disease tremendously tugs at the heart and strength of the person diagnosed, and even more the caregiver, bearing more than we believe we can handle. I even feel the wording of the marriage vows should include the letters ALS under sickness and health, and with a clause that asks whether we promise not to run out of the door screaming, because sometimes that's how we feel. But we have the right to say to a family member or friend, please don't judge me for being angry. We have the right to be afraid. We have the right to say, I can't do this. We have the right to say, I am not strong enough to handle this. We have the right to cry. And most importantly, we have the right to use sentence enhancers, which are curse words. Yes, we can scream. I try to make every day a positive day, but I am not a robot. And everything that I said, we have the right to, I have done it. Thank goodness, though, for prayer. No one gave us a heads up to ALS, nor did we ever imagine we would be doing the things we're doing now. We, the caregivers, hold the key to the locked door of ALS. We are the rainbows in the ALS clouds. Although the disease takes over their body, we know how to keep the heart pumping. Because after all, isn't the heart one of the things we fell in love with? The big question to ourselves is, what can we do? Well, let's start with the quality of life. From the person we are caring for, ask what are the things we can do, or what do they prefer for us not to do? David asked that I don't treat him like a child and overprotect him, but he's always doing crazy things like trying to climb on the ladder and things like that. He also asked that I continue to encourage him to drink plenty of water, take vitamins, and do activities that will strengthen his bones, like stretches and short walks, until he is no longer able to do them on his own. We know what type of music they love or favorite TV shows or programs, so you can have that in the room, or I make sure, there's something to remind him of things to feel positive about. You can think back to what was most relaxing to him or her during trying times. I remember occasions when David had a cold or just a rough day at work, and the things that would relax him during that time. And sometimes, he just wanted to be left alone. Yeah. Also, things I did during his really down days was to remind David of a funny moment or crazy things we did together. And now, because of both of our ages, not the disease, we dare not do them again. It can even be a crazy dance you did that makes them laugh, or your version of singing a particular song, or even funny jokes that we told each other. We all had moments that we dare not share with the public, and still the thought of them just makes us laugh. ALS affects each person differently, so what works for me may not be for others, but perhaps it brings similar ideas. The bottom line for me is not to forget, as caregivers, we also require self-pampering and attention. To remember that we are the most important aspect of how they live with the disease, and that's not easy. It breaks my heart to see my husband transforming, but I have to remember that I am here too, and how important it is to pamper me. So at this point, you may be thinking, okay, I'm busy, not just 24 hours a day, but sometimes 25 hours a day. So where and when is my time? Because I did not have a caregiver or family member to assist me. I bought a baby monitor, so whatever room I'm in or I go to, I can still hear him. And of course, there are other techniques as well. During the time David sleeps, I have a cup of coffee, tea, or my Pepsi. I take a shower or a bath, or do whatever allows me to feel a few moments of daily calmness. I take time at least 2 to 3 times each week to call a friend or family member that doesn't judge, but makes me smile and remind me how strong and courageous I am. Perhaps reaching out to a family or friends that can sit while you run to the store, mall, or just have some out of the house time, even if it's just for an hour. Not all of our friends will volunteer. I'm sure probably we all experience that. So you may want to look into getting a caregiver, particularly one familiar with ALS and has been vaccinated. We also have to accept when they say enough is enough. Yes, it will hurt if they make the decision of no more meds or tests, and that becomes the time to look into hospice care. However, I believe that it becomes tougher for them to see us give up our way of living and enjoyment with family and friends because we give our all to them. And oh yes, let's not forget COVID with the big list of places we cannot go and people we cannot allow in our homes. With ALS, we have to also put our affairs in order. Before David lost the ability to clearly speak, We had the unpleasant conversation about the importance of getting our affairs in order, advanced directives, wills, power of attorneys, and things like that. Every moment is a precious moment, so make it count. We may not believe that we are perfect because things don't always work out. Prior to David becoming ill, I was not taught ALS 101, but being the best us is perfect. And being ourselves is what really counts. I have had really tough moments, but I refuse to let that moment take away my whole day or pour into the next day. Sometimes just a smile to say I care makes a difference when we have no words to say. ALS is probably the hardest battle we have ever endured in our life, because every day we're not sure what to expect, but believe it, we got this because we're being ourselves. And when we feel we can no longer find ourselves in the midst of the ALS storm, please reach out, as Mary said, to get help for someone who won't judge you. When the thought comes that we think that we can't do this, step back for a moment. And again, as Mary says, breathe until we know that we can. We must believe in ourselves. We must believe in our goals. Each day, no matter how it turns out, is an accomplishment. We as caregivers must always remind ourselves of how courageous we are just for doing our best and making it through the day. We at Temple have awesome Zoom caregivers group at Temple, which Mary hosts. We call it Mary's Room. In Mary's Room, we laugh, we cry, we say sentence enhancers. We freely share and what we're going through and are never judged. We even have a Zoom happy hour on Thursdays, every other Thursday, where we have our favorite drinks and we just share and laugh. ALS has no agenda, race, or age preference. I will be placing my phone number and email address in the chat. You can feel free to reach out to me early morning or late at night. I also send out daily motivated emails, and if you'd like to receive one, let me know. To all our caregivers, I salute you and send a big virtuous hug because you are the most courageous. We are the most courageous and strongest people that we know. Continue to be the rainbow in the ALS cloud. To my husband, David, I love you. And as the song says, lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll help you carry on. Thank you so much, everyone. That's it.
Thank you so much, Marie.
Great. That was you're a light in the rainbow. We appreciate everything you shared with us, and on both sides, the happiness and the strength that you share with your husband, but the frustration and the anger, and it's okay. Yeah. So
and I just wanted to add to Marie, everything you said really resonated with me, and my team is here. I'm from EverythingALS. I'm one of the co-founders, along with Deb, Lisa, and Sarah, who are here along with me, and all of us have been caregivers. Yes. So we resonate with everything you said, and like, you know, we want to make sure that nobody here is going to feel like they're alone in this journey, because that's why we started EverythingALS, because we firsthand had an experience caring for our loved ones and having gone through it. And that was one of the reasons we never want anybody else to feel like the way we did. And thank you for sharing this, and please reach out to any of us, and we're here.
Yeah, my husband had a very hard time dealing with it. It took him over a year before he accepted it, and he didn't want to tell any family members or anyone else. So that left me alone, struggling by myself because I couldn't share with anyone else. And it's something you cannot do by yourself. You can't. But it's something that also, it's not so easy if you put out a need help sign that people will come running. So it's just so much that falls on us, but we're strong. We're stronger than we know. And you never really know that until you have to do something and you wonder what in the world is going on today, but it's okay. It's going to be okay. So one day at a time for me.
Thank you, Marie.
Yeah.
We're going to answer some of your questions that you put on the chat. Deb and I will take turns. Deb, if you want to pull up the first question, I'll lead. I'll ask Mary the first question because I got an individual chat. Mary, we talk about the courage for caregivers and what they go through. But how do you give someone the courage to ask for help? What is that for the people that can't get over that first step to ask for help? What is your advice to ask for those caregivers that need the help?
Thanks, Jamie. So for people that can't feel like they can't ask for the help, yeah, I mean, my encouragement would be, is there anyone that you feel safe with a little bit that maybe you could reach out to, even if they're not a medical person, or anybody that knows that something that's going on in your life, somebody, somebody that you feel safe with a little bit, that then might know someone, or might be able to reach out to another, healthcare provider or something for you. Yeah, that is a tricky thing. I have to say, I am, just from my own experience, not really a help asker. It was really, like I described, it was really enough kind of pain and frustration. And that really motivated me to just say, wow, I think I really need some help here. So yeah, is there someone? And if there's not, send me an email and I'll help talk you through it. If you don't feel like you have somebody that you can reach out to, please. Or I'm sure anybody here would as well. Yeah, so.
And there's also the situation that Marie alluded to where the person who is challenged with ALS does not want to reach out for help, but you need the help. And I found with my brother, because he felt very much like Marie's husband, he kept things very private, that finally we had to really tell and kind of put it off of him and put it on us, say, we need the help. I know you don't want it, but we need it. And we kind of took that off of him, or that feeling of responsibility, because even as Mary said early in her presentation, that people who have ALS sometimes feel like a burden. But I remember I saw something on Facebook and it always stuck with me, that people with ALS are not a burden, they have a burden, and ALS is that burden. And that's, really important. So for the caregivers reaching out for help, and also for talking the person you're caring for to get help, is often tricky.
I wanted to add also, you can ask, if the person that has ALS can speak, ask them, is there anyone that they don't mind that would come in and just spend some time with them, just so you can sit down and have a cup of coffee or take a moment. It's really tough taking care of a person with ALS, and you cannot do it by yourself. We all try, but you always need someone to help. So ask them, do they mind if someone comes in and said, just so you can step away just for a moment, but you do need someone.
There's another question. It says, for those of us who don't have a support group or even doctors that are knowledgeable about ALS, the money to pay caregivers, where do you suggest we get the training in order to perform the nursing duties of caring for our pals?
That's a great question. Can I take that? Or?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yes,
Okay,
please.
So yes, that's a great question. And I have to say that access to care is really a discussion around healthcare professionals and a lot of chronic diseases. So there are wonderful resources. I would hope that, that people can get connected at some point with maybe a neurologist, at least, that has some primary care physicians have some understanding. Neurologists hopefully would have a little bit more understanding. But of course, if that's not available, then there are wonderful resources. I'm assuming that the person that's asking the question, I'm not sure, has internet access, but, education in terms of some really, really valuable and medically valid sites. The ALS Hope Foundation, I know our website has videos in terms of how to help, and, from the physical therapist, about speech, all different concerns, from the physician and things like that. So there are resources to be able to educate yourself. Excuse me. Also, I have to say, so support groups were not an option, right? Connecting with other people. If that could potentially, maybe not a support group, but even if there is internet access, I know some of the caregivers share resources with each other a ton. I mean, many of them say when they just reach out and talk to another fellow caregiver that they have learned so much. Of course, everybody's situation is different, of course, and we want to make sure that people are medically safe. But yeah, that can be really helpful as well, just connecting with another person that has gone through these things.
Thank you. Someone put in the chat, I don't know if you all saw it, another to this question. I found the best way to ask help is get the closest, most available friend in your circle to be the spokesperson who rallies the others.
Yeah,
that was a great
advice.
suggestion.
Mary, question for you. Caregiving fatigue it happens, and it's expected, to be honest with you. When the caregiver reaches to that point, what can they do? Like, it's like where they're going to be lost. They're going to be drowning in that situation. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's a concern that we have, of course, yes, for all of our caregivers, because it's absolutely part of it. It can absolutely be part of it. So where do they go from there? Hopefully, we have some, resources in place already to help offset some of that fatigue, where they have, small moments to rejuvenate themselves and things like that. And I have to be honest, though, many don't. I didn't. I wasn't taking care of myself. That's just the reality of it. I really had to learn in the midst of my caregiving journey. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I really had to learn within my caregiving journey, along the journey, to make that time to, step back, breathe, pause, all those things that would give me little bursts, sleep when my, loved one was sleeping, things like that. So there's different tools and techniques and tips, I'm sure that, every person, depending on their individual circumstance, that we help people kind of piecemeal and figure out for themselves. But here's the overall, I'm like a broken record. Reach out. Ask for help. So I'm really feeling fatigued. When I showed the caregiver burnout, if people notice that that's maybe them, that's okay. This is not about finding fault. It's just about, well, if that's the case, how can we help? And if it's not your medical professionals, then, we're here, right? However, we can help too. It doesn't matter where we are. We'll talk on the phone. We'll help put a plan together for you. We'll do whatever we can to help find resources for you, to support you. I don't know if that helps.
No, that helps. Anger is also a big issue with a caregiver. And it's a natural feeling to have. We talk about reaching out. What about the caregiver that just says, I give up. I don't want to help. This is not what I signed up for. I mean, that's a raw emotion. But what do we do in that situation at that point?
Well, oftentimes, validate. I mean, most importantly, like, I don't judge people. I mean, I hope people that, I hope, we can't judge anyone for the experiences. This was nobody's vision. Who asked for this? No one, right? No one on this call. This was not the vision by any way, shape, or form. So absolutely anger, like, WTF, are you kidding? Here we are, this is what we're doing. So it's, I guess from my standpoint, it's 100%. I really try to validate people that is a natural emotion. What I also have to assess in that is that, because it can be a natural reaction to the circumstance. So is it, in a sense, for real? Is it a feeling in the moment? I really have to assess that. Or is it, wow, this is not something that you feel like you can tolerate, and potentially help that person explore that, while also making sure that the needs of the loved one, the person with ALS, also has their needs met, right? We've had caregivers leave, right? And I don't pass any judgment. It happens, what do I do then? I try to then help the person with ALS, thank God I don't work in a silo. I work with all of you, our team, try to help get their resources so their needs are met, But yes, I mean, anger. And this is the other thing, is that you guys all know, ALS is not something that, like, you get the diagnosis and it's like, okay, I have my brain around it. Now I can kind of, okay, I felt my emotions and now I accept. Because oftentimes there can be this whole process of, as changes occur, it's like this a new kind of wave of acceptance. Different emotions come up, it's here I am feeling. So it's this ongoing kind of wave of, grief, sadness, acceptance, grief, sadness, this kind of cycle. So anger is all part of that for, many people. And like I said, too, I mean, it doesn't have to be for everyone, all the time. But again, it's the big thing. Reach out.
Yeah.
Mary, when I was with David, when we were first told, I went home and I Googled everything. And that was probably the worst thing to do, because it just kind of makes everything so raw and just says they're going to die. And that's that. But the more and more I started seeing David change, the more harder it got for me, saying, I don't think I could do this. And there are times when I got very upset and I had to just go out in the car and sit down for a minute. Or it's times he couldn't make it to the bathroom and I had to help. I'm only 4'10.5". David is 6 something. So I can't lift him. It's really hard, but seeing more and more what he couldn't do. And I had to kind of think, what can I do? If I'm not a nurse, what part can I play? So I had to learn how to separate what can I do and what can't I do? I'm his wife. I can't just walk out the door. And yeah, I wanted to walk out the door, but then who do I leave in the house? How do I do it without a conscience? And so I had to learn, what can I do every day? But I always try to remember me, because if I fall apart, if I die, if I quit, if I have a stroke from trying to do too much, then what? So it's you have to have somebody, even if it's somebody just to talk to. It's hard, yes, getting a nurse, and it is expensive. So, but for me, I had to find out what's going to work for me. I'm in this, I'm staying in this, what's going to work for me. And that's why I always ask Mary, tell me everything I need to know. It may happen to David, it may not, but give me an idea. But it is, I'm sorry, it is frustrating. It does make us angry. We didn't ask for this. We didn't know anything about it. We didn't expect it, but we're here and we're doing it, and we're doing the best we can. So it's just, for me, whenever it gets too overwhelming, which is sometime every day, I have to stop and I have to step away or I will lose my mind. So right now, my grandson is staying with us to help when he can, but he has a life too. It's really a tough thing. It's very tough. It hurts and it's hard, but we are human. So please don't anyone feel bad about what you can't do, what you're frustrated about. You know, it's natural, it's normal, and it's tough. ALS is the toughest thing I've ever seen and ever dealt with. I don't know what I would do without our caregivers group. I don't know what I would do without my Temple group. My family doesn't help, and I can't afford a nurse, and we don't have a caregiver, but I have to do what I have to do. And it's just not easy. It's not easy.
No. it's
Thank you,
not.
Marie.
Yeah.
Marie,
Thank
on
you.
that note, we have a question that you might be able to help. I have an office upstairs in our home. My wife with ALS is downstairs. Is there a good high quality room monitor that has more than enough range for a two-way communication? You mentioned that you have a monitor. Are you able to talk back and forth, or any suggestions there?
So I do, and there was something else, and I don't have it with me in this office, but I can get it and get it to you. There is a camera you can put in, and I can't remember the name of it because I'm sorry I wasn't prepared, but I can get that information to you. There's a camera that you can put in the room, but you can also keep the other part in your pocket no matter where you go. Even if you go outside the house, you can still see them, you can still hear them. So yes, there are other resources, and I promise I will get them to you. There's many other resources because we really can't sit by their side 24 and 25 hours a day. So Jamie, I'll get that information to you today as soon as we get
Okay. And I think Deb and the Everything ALS team, when they send out the video, that we can answer, we can put some of these, the resource list and some of these answers on that email. Is that correct, Deb?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
And also, if you haven't seen our holiday webinar, it was really all just tips and tricks that people offered to make life a little easier. People who are, challenged with just, doing caregiving, and also from the people who are challenged with having the disease. So that's on our website, and you can go back. You can listen to any of our webinars, but that one might be apropos to this conversation today.
Yeah, I'm putting it on the chat. It's everythingals.org/videos, or go to our YouTube and subscribe. It's called Tips and Tricks. It was recorded in December, where we had each of the participants, people with ALS and their caregivers, come and show what tip that they have. So it's what tips and tricks that they had. It's really well, it came out really well. We have a lot of good resources there. I would highly encourage everyone to watch that.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
And I also put the Caring Bridge website in the chat.
I wanted to answer Karen's question, who said, who taught me to do the nurse skills? I learned the hard way. David has a problem with asking for help. And so I watched him try to reach for something right at the bedstand and fall out the bed instead of asking for help. So I moved things closer to the bed. I try to do things that, just from watching the things that he can't do, to make it better, because he just doesn't ask. I don't know if it's embarrassment, if it's a man thing, sorry, Jamie, but he doesn't. So I just try to do what I think is best. When I see him trying to put on his underwear or socks, and I'll be in the area and I'll watch him for a while without micromanaging. And then after a while, he'll look up. So I'll just bend down and start helping. And some things I just go ahead and do because I know he's not going to ask. So most of the things I'm learning as I go. Every second I'm learning as I go, because all of our situations are so different. And it is hard, but I promise to me that I'm not going to allow myself to burn out or get so stressed out trying to help. And you're kind of being pushed away because they don't want your help, but they need your help. So I'm learning as I go. And he used to fall all the time and say there was something in the way. And I used to make excuses and say, oh, I'll move it. But there wasn't anything there. So now I say, you have to use your cane. You have to do this. You have to do that. Sometimes you have to be tough,
Yeah.
But I'm learning as I go.
And
Go ahead,
Jamie.
Doug. Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I just had a quick question, just because I realized that this is a group. Just because I didn't know I could see the chat, but Karen's question just so Karen, I guess I'm just wondering, are you connected to a clinic or not? I'm not sure. Like an ALS clinic, because that might be helpful. But if not, then we could go from there. Yes, but it's 6 hours away. Yes. Okay. So are you able to then, a lot of us on the team, we will video with people to go through needs and questions and things like that, if that might be a possibility. Because a lot of things have not been able to be face-to-face, which has been challenging. But this Zoom, this platform, video platform, telemedicine even has allowed us to, still connect with people in their homes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm,
problems and so, yeah.
yeah. And I'm assuming Indu, with the tips and tricks, it will have some information on kind of those nursing skills on like transferring to bed, that kind of stuff. Will that be on there?
Yes, yes.
Great.
And there's also
great resources.
And somebody put in the chat that there was something online, so that they were looking at. But check out the chat. I don't see it now, but do you see it, Jamie, where somebody made a suggestion, or Mary, for nursing something?
Oh, a good resource book, ALS in Orientation by Elliot Dunsky, MD. I'll copy and paste it and put it back on. Thank you, Elizabeth. Is that what, I think that's what we're talking about.
There was something else about a website, YouTube, but.
The AARP.
Okay.
Maybe? Okay.
Yes,
All right.
the book by Dr. Dunsky is very good. I just finished it last night. He has a ton of resources in there, YouTube videos that you can look at. I haven't looked at all the YouTube videos. My mother is currently on hospice also in my home. And so, like he said, you're going to have to eventually possibly learn how to use a Hoyer lift. Excellent piece of machinery. The only way we have one is through hospice right now. But I'm going to try my best to see but once my mother passes, that if I can buy that thing off of the medical equipment company for a reduced price, I'm going to buy it to use for my husband, because that thing, believe me, when somebody falls on the ground, on the floor, you're a patient, and you can't get them up, that Hoyer lift will get them up and transfer them out of the bed. And the doctor that wrote this book had ALS himself. And so he describes a lot of the stuff that we have talked about today, but also a lot of the challenges that the caregivers will need to be prepared for as the disease progresses.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The website Mary Connolly suggested was dailycaring.com, in case you're interested. Were there any, we do want to be respectful of time. Were there any other questions that you see, Jamie, that we didn't address, or Mary, that we did not address?
No, I don't see any other questions. But feel free to ask away. And again, this conversation is great because, we're talking about Hoyer lists, we're talking about resources, and this is done by, a group together. We're joined together. This is what we're about. We're not alone, and we're helping each other in this. We're trying to learn something from Mary and Marie, but we're learning from each other about what others have used. And I think this is a fantastic resource.
Yeah. Jamie and I are kind of talking about doing something quarterly, 4 times a year, because a lot of caregivers do not have caregiver groups close to them or can't get to them because of COVID. So we're going to explore doing more of this. So if you have any suggestions, you can write us at email us at EverythingALS. Lisa, would you be so kind as to put the email address in the chat? Lisa's our amazing technical social media person. I just am going to sign off now, and I think we'll kind of close out. Is that good, Jamie? Are we
Yeah.
we'll wrap
Yeah,
up?
Yeah, we'll have one
and we'll-
more. If there's another, somebody just said there's groups on Facebook that we can reach out to. That's awesome. And yeah, any last questions? Do we want to open it up to anyone really quick?
You know, I had an interesting conversation with one of my team members, Sarah, today about the Facebook groups. And a lot of caregivers do use them to vent, and that's really valuable because it's a place where it's really just for caregivers. So you can say things that maybe you wouldn't want to, you know, you can say things in anonymity that maybe you don't want to say to friends or relatives. And then you can just say, yeah, you know, I feel better the next day. And I think those things are valuable. And you read them and it makes, you know, it may sound really negative, but just like anybody in any walk of life, we all need to vent sometime. And then I don't know who it was, but in closing for me, I just wanted to say somebody had put in the chat, just like on the airplane, when they say you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. I think that's a lot what Marie and Mary were talking about. You really do have to take care of yourself in order to, you know, to be the best caregiver that you can be. And that's going to, you know, be very different from one day to the other. But I really want to thank you for joining us today. You all are wonderful.
And
Yeah.
I did add our email if you want to contact Everything ALS, and we do have a private Facebook group. So everything on that chat is not put out to the public. So if you guys are interested in joining that, or following us on social media, it gives updates on when we host our webinars. So you're welcome to join any of those groups. Those are public. The one private one is our Facebook private, and it says that it's private. So
Yeah.
Right. And then we have our email address that Lisa put in, right? Lisa, you put our email in.
I put info@everythingals.org.
Right. And so if you have any suggestions for a future caregiver webinar, please email me and Jamie and I will put that together.
Yep, and absolutely. And join us. I say us because I feel like I'm part of the team, but join Everything ALS every other Wednesday because you'll learn so much more. I know this is about caregiving, but you can learn so much more as a group together. And I'm going to leave you with this. Mary, do you know what the happiest animal on the planet is?
The sloth?
It's the goldfish. You know why?
Yeah.
It's got a 10-second memory. So I encourage you all in tough times, when everybody's discouraged, be a goldfish. Forget about, you know, what just happened, and you know, forget that and move forward and onward. And know that even right here as a group, we love you, we support you. You're not alone, and just take that with you. Just please, you know, we're here for you.
I also
Thank
want
you.
to say to everyone, in case you don't hear it, thank you. You are appreciated. You are loved. You are recognized. You're not invisible, but just thank you. It's always good to be a part of a family where someone else understands what we're going through. So just thank you for being you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great
Bye.